The entire household falls silent as Lord Ryoma guides him to the high table, wearing his lord's robes, marked by 5 warriors' touches, about to be claimed publicly as theirs. Every eye judges, every whisper condemns. One wrong move means exile or death. 24 hours ago, he was invisible. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Takeshi knew he was in trouble the moment he heard their voices echoing through the steam. 5 of them, the most elite samurai in Lord Ryoma's guard, and he was alone in the private bathhouse, completely naked, with nowhere to hide. His heart hammered against his ribs as their shadows appeared through the mist, massive silhouettes moving with the fluid grace of predators. He should have checked the schedule. He should have known they would come here after training. He should have been anywhere but here, vulnerable and exposed, when the men who haunted his every waking thought entered the bath. Takeshi had served in Lord Ryoma's household for 3 years, ever since his village had sent him at 17 as part of their annual tribute. He was 20 now, no longer the frightened boy who had arrived with nothing but the clothes on his back and a desperate need to prove his worth. He had learned the intricate rituals of the household, mastered the art of invisible service, and built walls around himself so high that no one could see the loneliness that consumed him in the dark hours before dawn. He attended to Lord Ryoma's private chambers, laid out his robes each morning, prepared his tea with precise measurements of ceremony and devotion. He was good at his work, efficient, forgettable, exactly what a servant should be. But 3 months ago, something had shifted. Lord Ryoma had begun to notice him, really notice him, in ways that made Takeshi's skin flush hot and his breath catch in his throat. It started with small things. A lingering glance when Takeshi brought morning tea. A hand that brushed his when taking a scroll. Questions about his life before service, asked in that deep voice that rumbled through Takeshi's chest like distant thunder. Lord Ryoma was everything Takeshi was not. Tall, easily standing a head above most men, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a province. His body was honed by decades of martial training. Lean muscle defined beneath silk robes, movements fluid with deadly precision. Takeshi had seen him practice in the yard, watched sweat glisten on exposed skin as Lord Ryoma moved through sword forms with breathtaking grace. He had tended those same hands after practice, washing away dirt and blood from sparring, feeling the calluses earned from years gripping a blade. Those hands were elegant despite their lethal purpose, long fingers that could snap a neck or trace the rim of a teacup with equal dexterity. But it was Lord Ryoma's eyes that undid Takeshi completely. Dark and intense, they seemed to see through every defense Takeshi had built, stripping away the servant's mask to find the lonely, desperate man beneath. When Lord Ryoma looked at him, Takeshi felt naked in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. And Lord Ryoma looked at him often these days, too often, with an intensity that made Takeshi's hands shake when he poured tea, made his breath quicken when he adjusted robes, made heat pool low in his belly in ways he did not fully understand, but desperately wanted to explore. It was not just Lord Ryoma, though he commanded Takeshi's attention, like the sun commands the sky. The other 4 elite guards had begun to watch him too. Takeshi felt their eyes on him during meals, when he moved through the halls, when he attended to his duties. It should have frightened him. These were men who could kill without hesitation, who had earned their positions through skill and ruthlessness. Instead, their attention made him feel exposed and exhilarated in equal measure. There was Kenji, the weapons master, nearly as tall as Lord Ryoma, with a build like carved stone. He spoke rarely, but his dark eyes tracked Takeshi with predatory focus. Daichi, the strategy advisor, whose lean frame hid strength that could pin a man effortlessly. He smiled more than the others, but his smiles held promises that made Takeshi's pulse race. Hiroshi, the youngest of the elite guard at 28, moved with coiled energy barely restrained, muscles shifting beneath his training clothes in ways that drew Takeshi's forbidden gaze. And Akira, quiet and observant, who seemed to catalog every blush, every nervous gesture, every time Takeshi's eyes lingered where they should not. Together they formed Lord Ryoma's inner circle, men who had fought beside him for years, who commanded respect and fear throughout the province. And for reasons Takeshi could not fathom, they had all begun to pay attention to one insignificant servant who wanted nothing more than to disappear. Except that was not quite true, was it? Takeshi did not want to disappear. He wanted to be seen. By them. By Lord Ryoma especially. He wanted those dark eyes on him, wanted those elegant hands to touch him, wanted that commanding voice to speak his name with something other than distant courtesy. The wanting terrified him. It defied every rule of propriety, every boundary between lord and servant, every teaching about duty and place. Takeshi was meant to serve invisibly, gratefully, without desire or complaint. He was not meant to lie awake at night imagining what Lord Ryoma's mouth would taste like, wondering what it would feel like to have those powerful hands grip his hips, fantasizing about surrendering to strength and authority in ways that made his whole body ache with need. But he did. He wanted with an intensity that consumed him, that made his carefully controlled existence feel like a cage growing smaller every day. And now, in the bathhouse, with steam swirling around his naked body, and 5 massive warriors emerging from the mist, all his careful control shattered like fragile ceramic. Takeshi tried to make himself small, sinking deeper into the hot water until it reached his chin. The bathhouse was designed for privacy, screens and steam creating an atmosphere of tranquil isolation. Usually servants bathed in shifts, careful never to overlap with the samurai who used these facilities. But Takeshi had lost track of time, lingering in the heat longer than he should have. And now he was paying for that lapse with his dignity. Lord Ryoma entered first, as was his right. Even through the steam, Takeshi could see the power in his frame, the way he moved with absolute confidence in his body and his place in the world. He had removed his training clothes, but still wore a light underrobe that clung to his damp skin, outlining the muscle beneath. His hair was loose from its usual top knot, falling past his shoulders in dark waves that made him look younger, almost approachable. Then he saw Takeshi. Their eyes met across the bath, and Takeshi watched Lord Ryoma go utterly still. That penetrating gaze traveled over him, taking in his flushed face, his wide eyes, the way he was trying to make himself invisible in the water. Something flickered in Lord Ryoma's expression, something hungry and possessive that made Takeshi's breath stop in his throat. The other 4 entered behind their lord, filling the space with overwhelming masculine presence. Kenji's eyes found Takeshi immediately, and a slow smile crossed his usually stern face. Daichi made a soft sound of interest. Hiroshi's gaze heated with unmistakable want. Akira simply watched, reading Takeshi's panic with that unnerving perception he possessed. Takeshi should leave. He should apologize for the intrusion, exit the bath with what little dignity he could salvage, and never speak of this again. But he could not move. He was frozen under the weight of 5 pairs of eyes, all focused on him with varying degrees of intensity. "Takeshi!" Lord Ryoma's voice was low, controlled, but something underneath it made Takeshi's name sound like a caress. "You are here late." It was not a question, but Takeshi answered anyway, his voice emerging smaller than he wanted. "Forgive me, my lord. I lost track of time. I will leave immediately." He started to rise from the water, then remembered with hot mortification that he was completely naked. His clothes were folded on a bench near the entrance, impossibly far away now that 5 men blocked the path. Heat that had nothing to do with the bath flooded his face. "Stay." The command was soft, but absolute. Lord Ryoma moved closer to the bath's edge, looking down at Takeshi with that intense focus that made rational thought impossible. Every instinct screamed at Takeshi to refuse, to insist on leaving, to maintain the proper distance between servant and lord. But Lord Ryoma had given an order, and Takeshi had been trained too well to disobey. He sank back into the water, hyper-aware of his nakedness, of their eyes on him, of the way steam curled around them all, like something alive. The 5 warriors began removing their remaining clothing with casual efficiency. Takeshi tried not to look, tried to focus on the water or the ceiling or anything except the display of powerful male bodies being revealed around him. But his eyes had a will of their own, stealing glances that seared themselves into his memory. Lord Ryoma's body was a masterwork of controlled strength, lean and defined with the kind of muscle that came from decades of disciplined training. Scars marked his skin, pale lines against bronze that told stories of battles survived. When he stepped into the water, muscles shifted beneath skin in ways that made Takeshi's mouth go dry. Kenji was broader, built like a fortress wall, with thick muscle that spoke of overwhelming power. Daichi had the deceptive leanness of a blade, looking almost elegant until he moved and revealed the strength coiled beneath. Hiroshi was younger but no less impressive, his body honed to aggressive perfection. Akira combined grace and danger in equal measure, every line of him speaking to controlled violence barely leashed. They settled into the water around Takeshi, not crowding him exactly, but creating a loose circle that made escape impossible without explicitly pushing past them. The bath that had felt spacious moments ago now seemed intimate, charged with a tension that made breathing difficult. Takeshi kept his gaze fixed on the water's surface, watching steam rise in lazy spirals. He could feel their attention like physical weight, could sense them looking at him even when he refused to meet their eyes. His heart hammered so hard he was certain they could hear it, see his pulse jumping in his throat. "You serve Lord Ryoma well," Kenji said, his deep voice rumbling through the steam. It was not phrased as a question, but seemed to invite response. "I try to fulfill my duties adequately," Takeshi managed, still not looking up. "Adequately?" Daichi laughed softly. "Lord Ryoma speaks of you often. I do not think adequate is the word he would use." Takeshi's eyes flew up at that, finding Lord Ryoma's face. His lord was watching him with an expression Takeshi could not quite read, something between amusement and hunger. "You have proven yourself invaluable," Lord Ryoma said quietly. "Attentive, perceptive, beautiful in your devotion to duty." Beautiful. The word hung in the steamy air like a confession. Takeshi felt heat flood through him that had nothing to do with the bathwater. Lords did not call servants beautiful. They did not look at them the way Lord Ryoma was looking at him now, with open want barely restrained by propriety. "My lord is too kind," Takeshi whispered, but his voice shook. "I am not kind," Lord Ryoma corrected, moving slightly closer through the water. "I am honest, and honestly, Takeshi, you are beautiful. Particularly now, with your defenses down, letting me see what you work so hard to hide." Takeshi's breath came faster. This was dangerous territory, crossing lines that should never be crossed. But he could not seem to make himself pull away from the intensity in Lord Ryoma's eyes. "What am I hiding, my lord?" The question escaped before wisdom could stop it. Lord Ryoma's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. Quote 15. The confession stole Takeshi's breath. Around them, the other four had gone very still, watching this exchange with focused attention. I thought I was alone in this wanting, Hiroshi said softly. I thought it was only me who watched you move through the halls and wished I had the right to touch, to claim, to keep. You were not alone, Akira added, his quiet voice somehow more intense for its lack of volume. We have all wanted. We have all held back, respecting boundaries that perhaps we should not respect. Takeshi looked around the circle of men surrounding him, seeing the truth in each of their faces. They wanted him, all of them. The knowledge should have terrified him, but instead it sent liquid heat through his veins, made his body respond in ways he could not hide beneath the water. This cannot happen, Takeshi said, but his voice lacked conviction. I am a servant. You are samurai. Lord Ryoma is my master. There are rules, proper conduct, boundaries that exist for good reason. Rules we made, Lord Ryoma said, moving close enough now that Takeshi could feel the warmth of his body through the water. Boundaries we can choose to respect or cross. Tell me truthfully, Takeshi, do you want to maintain those boundaries, or do you want what we want? It was a test and an invitation and a surrender all at once. Takeshi knew that his answer would change everything, that there would be no going back once he spoke the truth that lived in his bones. I want, he whispered, the admission tearing free from some deep place inside him. I have wanted for so long I barely remember what it felt like before this ache lived in me constantly. But I do not know how to want this. I do not know what to do with these feelings, how to be anything other than afraid. Something in Lord Ryoma's expression softened even as his eyes remained hungry. Quote 26, quote 27, Takeshi asked, genuinely confused. Quote 28, Daiichi said. Quote 29, quote 30, Kenji added. Quote 31, quote 32, Hiroshi continued. Quote 33, quote 34, Akira finished. Quote 35. Lord Ryoma reached out slowly, giving Takeshi time to pull away if he wished. When Takeshi remained frozen, Lord Ryoma's hand cupped his face with devastating gentleness. His thumb traced Takeshi's cheekbone, calloused skin rough against flushed softness. Lord Ryoma asked quietly. Takeshi shook his head mutely. There had been no time for such things in his life, no space for romance or exploration. He had gone from child to servant with no transition, no chance to discover what his body might want beyond survival. Quote 38. Another headshake. Takeshi felt tears prick his eyes from the admission, from the overwhelming vulnerability of this moment. Quote 39. Lord Ryoma promised. Quote 40. It was the question that mattered. The one that gave Takeshi the choice his position in life so rarely afforded him. He could say no, could retreat back into safety and duty and the familiar cage of his existence, or he could be brave enough to reach for what he wanted, even if the wanting terrified him. Quote 41. Takeshi breathed. Quote 42. Lord Ryoma's smile was devastating. Then let me kiss you, and we will figure out the rest together. He leaned in slowly, giving Takeshi time to adjust to the closeness, to the reality of what was about to happen. When their lips finally met, Takeshi made a small sound of surprise at the sensation. Lord Ryoma's mouth was warm and firm, moving against his with patient skill. The kiss started gentle, exploratory, letting Takeshi learn the shape and taste of it. Then, Lord Ryoma's tongue traced the seam of Takeshi's lips, requesting entry, and Takeshi opened for him on pure instinct. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and consuming. Lord Ryoma's hand moved to the back of Takeshi's neck, holding him in place while he thoroughly claimed his mouth. Takeshi had no idea what to do with his hands, with his body, with the overwhelming sensations flooding through him. He gripped Lord Ryoma's shoulders for balance, feeling hard muscle shift beneath wet skin, and made soft, desperate sounds into the kiss that would have embarrassed him if he had any capacity for embarrassment left. When Lord Ryoma finally pulled back, Takeshi was breathing hard, his lips swollen and sensitized. He stared up at his lord with wide eyes, shocked by how much he wanted more, wanted everything. "Beautiful," Lord Ryoma murmured. "You are so responsive, so perfect. I could kiss you for hours and never grow tired of the sounds you make." Around them, the other four were watching with undisguised heat in their eyes. Takeshi felt exposed under their collective gaze, but not in a bad way. He felt seen, wanted, desired in ways he had never experienced. "May I kiss you as well?" Daiichi asked, moving closer. "I have been imagining it for weeks." Takeshi looked to Lord Ryoma, uncertain of the protocol for this unprecedented situation. Lord Ryoma smiled and nodded permission. "We share everything," he explained. "What belongs to me belongs to them. If you agree to be ours, Takeshi, you belong to all of us equally. We will take care of you together, please you together, make certain you never doubt your worth or your place with us." The concept was overwhelming, but something in Takeshi responded to it with fierce joy. Not just one man wanting him, but five. Not just accepted, but claimed, possessed, treasured by warriors who could have anyone they desired. "Yes," Takeshi whispered, "I want to be yours, all of yours." Daiichi's kiss was different from Lord Ryoma's, more playful, teasing Takeshi's mouth open with clever lips before delving deep. He made Takeshi chase his tongue, teaching him without words how to kiss back, how to take as well as receive. When Daiichi pulled away, he was smiling with satisfaction. Quote 52, he praised. Quote 53. Hiroshi came next, and his kiss was urgent, hungry, with less patience than the others. He kissed like he was starving, and Takeshi was sustenance, consuming and overwhelming. Takeshi felt Hiroshi's hands grip his waist beneath the water, holding him steady while thoroughly ravishing his mouth. Kenji's kiss was surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating size, reverent almost, like Takeshi was something precious to be cherished rather than consumed. The tenderness of it made Takeshi's eyes sting with unexpected emotion. Finally, Akira, whose kiss was deep and thorough and seemed to read every response Takeshi made, adjusting and adapting to maximize his pleasure. Akira kissed like he did everything else, with total focus and devastating perception. When Akira pulled back, Takeshi was trembling, overwhelmed by sensation and emotion in equal measure. 5 different kisses from 5 different men, each perfect in its own way, each making him feel wanted beyond measure. "Too much?" Lord Ryoma asked gently, reading the overwhelm in Takeshi's expression. Quote 55. Takeshi managed. Quote 56. Lord Ryoma laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Quote 57. First time. The words sent heat flooding through Takeshi's body, made his pulse race with anticipation and nervousness combined. "Will it hurt?" he asked, then immediately felt foolish for the question. But Lord Ryoma's expression was nothing but tender, he said honestly. Takeshi said, surprising himself with how true the words were. Quote 62. Quote 63. Lord Ryoma said, rising from the water in one fluid motion. Water sluiced off his body, defining every muscle, every scar, the evidence of his desire unmistakable and impressive. Takeshi stared, unable to help himself, and felt his own body respond with aching need. The others rose as well, 5 perfect masculine forms surrounding Takeshi like an honor guard. He stood on shaking legs, suddenly aware of his own nakedness in new ways, conscious of their eyes traveling over him with appreciation and hunger. They dried quickly, helping Takeshi when his hands shook too badly to manage the cloth effectively. Gentle touches that felt like promises, calloused fingers skimming over sensitive skin, building anticipation for what would come next. Lord Ryoma wrapped Takeshi in a soft robe, tying it with careful hands. He said to the others. The walk through the castle corridors felt surreal. Takeshi moved at the center of their protective circle, hyper-aware of the men surrounding him. His body thrummed with need and nervousness, wanting and uncertainty tangled together until he could not tell them apart. They encountered no one in the halls at this late hour. The household slept, while Takeshi's entire world transformed around him. Lord Ryoma's private chambers were spacious and elegant, tatami mats soft beneath Takeshi's feet, paper screens filtering moonlight into gentle illumination. Incense burned in the corner, filling the air with sandalwood and something earthier. The sleeping mat was large, designed for a man of Lord Ryoma's size, now about to accommodate 6 bodies in varying states of arousal and need. Lord Ryoma shut the screen behind them, sealing them in private sanctuary. Then he turned to Takeshi with eyes that promised everything. Quote 66, he said quietly. Quote 67. Takeshi thought about his life before this moment. The loneliness, the endless service, the feeling of being invisible even when surrounded by people. He thought about lying awake at night, yearning for connection, for touch, for someone to see him as more than just a function to be performed. Then he looked at the 5 men, watching him with such open desire, such genuine care, and knew there was only one answer he could give. Quote 68, he said firmly. Quote 69. Lord Ryoma stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. Quote 70, he said softly. Quote 71. Takeshi nodded, though his heart was racing so fast he thought it might burst from his chest. Lord Ryoma's hand came up to cup his face again, thumb stroking over his cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Use your words, Lord Ryoma commanded gently. I need to hear you say it. I understand, Takeshi whispered. Tonight is about me, about learning what I want, what I like, and you will all teach me. Good, Lord Ryoma praised, and the approval in his voice made warmth bloom in Takeshi's chest. Quote 77. His hands moved to the tie of Takeshi's robe, fingers working the knot with practiced ease. The fabric parted slowly, and cool air hit Takeshi's heated skin. He stood perfectly still, barely breathing as Lord Ryoma pushed the robe off his shoulders. It pooled at his feet, leaving him completely exposed once again. But this was different from the bathhouse. There he had water to hide in, steam to obscure. Here, in the soft light of Lord Ryoma's chambers, there was nowhere to hide, nothing to shield him from their gazes. Perfect, Kenji murmured from behind him. Even more beautiful than I imagined. Takeshi felt hands on his shoulders, large and warm, belonging to Kenji. The weapons master stood behind him, not touching more than necessary, but close enough that Takeshi could feel his body heat, his presence solid and reassuring. Are you nervous? Daichi asked, moving to stand at Takeshi's side. His fingers traced idle patterns on Takeshi's arm, light touches that felt like questions. Yes, Takeshi admitted, but also excited. I want this even though I'm afraid of how much I want it. Fear is natural, Akira said, positioning himself at Takeshi's other side. Quote 84. Hiroshi knelt before Takeshi, looking up at him with dark eyes filled with hunger and something softer. Quote 85, he asked. Quote 86. Takeshi looked down at the younger samurai, saw genuine desire mixed with careful restraint, and felt something shift inside him. These powerful men were asking permission, treating him like his consent mattered, like his wants were important, even though they could simply take what they desired. Quote 87. Takeshi said, his voice stronger now. Moz quote 88. Hiroshi's hand settled on Takeshi's hips, thumb stroking the hollow where hip met thigh. Such a simple touch, but it sent electricity racing through Takeshi's nervous system. He gasped, and Hiroshi smiled with satisfaction. So responsive, Hiroshi praised. I barely touched you and already you are trembling. Kenji's hands began to knead the tense muscles of Takeshi's shoulders, working out knots he had been carrying for months, maybe years. The combination of Kenji's strong hands eased tension, while Hiroshi's clever fingers explored sensitive skin, created a dizzying contrast of sensation. Daichi leaned in to press kisses along Takeshi's neck, finding the spot where pulse hammered frantically against skin. Each kiss felt like a brand, marking him, claiming him. On his other side, Akira mirrored the action, lips tracing the opposite side of his throat with careful attention. Lord Ryoma stood before Takeshi, watching his reactions with intense focus. Quote 91, he commanded softly. Quote 92, quote 93. Takeshi managed, his voice breathy and uncertain. Quote 94, quote 95. Lord Ryoma explained, his hand trailing down Takeshi's chest, tracing the definition of muscle earned from years of labor. More means discovering that pleasure can build and build until you think you cannot take any more, and then finding you can take even more than that. His fingers found Takeshi's nipple, circling it with feather-light touches. Takeshi had never paid attention to that part of his body, never realized it could be sensitive, could create sensation that arrowed straight down to pool as heat between his legs. He made a sound of surprise, and Lord Ryoma's smile was knowing. You like that, Lord Ryoma observed. Your body tells me what your words cannot yet articulate. He continued the teasing touches while the others explored different territory. Hiroshi's hand slid up Takeshi's thighs, getting closer to where Takeshi was hard and aching, but not quite touching. Kenji's hands moved from shoulders down his back, strong fingers mapping muscle and bone. Daichi and Akira kissed and licked at his neck, his jaw behind his ears, finding sensitive spots Takeshi never knew existed. Takeshi felt like he was coming apart, like his body was no longer entirely his own, but belonged to their collective touch. He did not know where one sensation ended and another began, did not know which hands were whose, only that everywhere they touched felt impossibly good. Quote 99, he heard himself beg, though he was not certain what he was begging for. Quote 100. Lord Ryoma asked, his hand finally wrapping around Takeshi's arousal, grip firm and perfect. Tell me what you need. I do not know, Takeshi gasped out honestly. I just know I need something, anything, everything. I feel like I am going to fly apart if you do not give me whatever comes next. Then let me show you, Lord Ryoma said, and guided Takeshi backward toward the sleeping mat. They laid him down with careful hands, arranging him on soft fabric, with his head pillowed and his body exposed. The 5 warriors surrounded him, looking down at him with expressions that made Takeshi feel precious beyond measure. We are going to prepare you, Lord Ryoma explained, kneeling beside the mat. Make your body ready to take one of us. It will feel strange at first, possibly uncomfortable, but if we do it correctly, it will become pleasure unlike anything you have experienced. Do you trust us to do this? Takeshi looked up at the 5 faces surrounding him, saw care and hunger and determination to make this good for him, and nodded. I trust you, he said clearly. I trust all of you. Show me everything. Lord Ryoma reached for a small jar beside the sleeping mat, opening it to reveal oil that gleamed in the dim light. He coated his fingers thoroughly, while Hiroshi gently spread Takeshi's legs, positioning him for what would come next. Quote 109. Lord Ryoma instructed as his oil-slicked fingers traced where Takeshi had never been touched. Quote 110. The first press of Lord Ryoma's finger was strange, foreign, creating pressure in places Takeshi had never considered. He tensed instinctively, and immediately Daichi was there, kissing him to distract from the unfamiliar sensation. Kenji's hands stroked soothing patterns on his chest. Akira whispered encouragement in his ear. Hiroshi held his legs steady, thumbs rubbing calming circles on his inner thighs. Slowly, carefully, Lord Ryoma worked him open. One finger became two, stretching and preparing while the others kept Takeshi floating on sensation, kept him from tensing too much or pulling away. And gradually, impossibly, the strangeness transformed into something else. Something that made Takeshi's breath catch for entirely different reasons. There, Lord Ryoma said with satisfaction when Takeshi made a particularly desperate sound. That is what you were made to feel. That is the pleasure your body has been waiting to discover. His fingers moved with more purpose now, stroking that place inside Takeshi that sent lightning through his entire nervous system. Takeshi arched off the mat, crying out with shock and overwhelming sensation. It was too much and not nearly enough all at once. Please, he begged again. I cannot, please. I know what you need, Lord Ryoma promised, and I am going to give it to you. He positioned himself between Takeshi's spread legs, his own arousal evident and impressive. Takeshi stared, feeling nervousness spike again at the reality of what was about to happen. Lord Ryoma was not small, and Takeshi could not quite fathom how this would work. Lord Ryoma seemed to read his anxiety because he leaned down to kiss Takeshi deeply, thoroughly, until the younger man melted beneath him. Quote 117. He murmured against Takeshi's lips. I will make this good for you, I promise. Then he was pressing forward, slow and careful, giving Takeshi time to adjust to the intrusion. The stretch was intense, bordering on painful, and Takeshi gripped Lord Ryoma's shoulders hard enough to leave marks. The other four surrounded them, offering distraction and comfort, their hands and mouths everywhere, keeping Takeshi from tensing too much. Quote 119. Akira coached quietly. Quote 120. Takeshi forced himself to breathe, to relax muscles that wanted to clench against the overwhelming fullness. Lord Ryoma moved with excruciating patience, pushing deeper in increments so small they were barely movement, waiting for Takeshi's body to accommodate him before continuing. And then, finally, he was fully seated. Takeshi felt impossibly full, stretched beyond what should be possible, and yet there was no real pain, just intense pressure and the foreign sensation of being joined with another person so intimately. How do you feel? Lord Ryoma asked, his voice strained with the effort of holding still. Full, Takeshi managed, so full I can barely breathe, but not bad, not painful. Just overwhelming. Good, Lord Ryoma praised. Now I am going to move, and you are going to discover why people crave this connection. He pulled back slightly, then pushed forward again, setting a slow rhythm that let Takeshi's body adjust. Each movement created friction, pressure, sensation that Takeshi had no framework for understanding. It was nothing like touching himself. Nothing like the clumsy explorations he had attempted alone in the dark. This was connection, intimacy, another person learning his body while sharing their own. This was Lord Ryoma's weight above him, inside him, claiming him in the most fundamental way possible. This was being surrounded by four other men who watched with hunger and tenderness, who touched him and whispered encouragement, and made him feel cherished beyond measure. Lord Ryoma's rhythm increased gradually, finding an angle that made stars burst behind Takeshi's eyes. He cried out, back arching, hands scrabbling for purchase on Lord Ryoma's shoulders. The pleasure built with shocking intensity, faster than he could process, higher than he knew was possible. Lord Ryoma encouraged, his voice rough with his own mounting pleasure. Quote 127. Takeshi did not know what he was reaching for, only that his entire body was straining towards something just beyond his grasp. The pleasure spiraled higher and tighter until he thought he might die from it, until he could not breathe or think or do anything except feel. And then it broke. Pleasure crashed through him in waves so intense he screamed, his body clenching around Lord Ryoma, every nerve ending firing at once. He heard himself crying out Lord Ryoma's name, felt himself shaking apart, saw a white light behind his closed eyelids as sensation overwhelmed everything else. Lord Ryoma followed moments later, his own release evident in the way his rhythm faltered, the way he buried his face in Takeshi's neck and groaned his completion. They shuddered together, bodies joined, pleasure shared. When Takeshi could think again, could breathe again, he found himself cradled in Lord Ryoma's arms. The other four gathered close around them. Tears streamed down his face, though he felt no sadness, only overwhelming emotion at the intimacy of what they had just shared. Beautiful, Daichi whispered, wiping away Takeshi's tears with gentle fingers. Quote 129. Quote 130. Takeshi asked, his voice small and uncertain. Lord Ryoma laughed softly, the sound warm against Takeshi's skin. There is no correct, only what feels good. And judging by your response, it felt very good indeed. It felt like dying and being reborn, Takeshi said honestly. Like everything I knew about my body was wrong, and you showed me the truth of what I could feel. That was just the beginning, Hiroshi promised, his hand stroking patterns on Takeshi's thigh. Quote 135. Takeshi's body stirred with interest despite his exhaustion. More now. Not immediately, Lord Ryoma said, carefully withdrawing and making Takeshi wince at the loss. Your body needs time to recover from its first experience. But later, yes, we have all night, Takeshi. And we intend to use every moment of it, teaching you exactly what your body is capable of. They cleaned him with warm cloths, tender touches that felt like worship. Then Lord Ryoma positioned Takeshi against his chest, holding him close while the others arranged themselves around them on the large sleeping mat. 5 powerful bodies created a cocoon of warmth and safety, and Takeshi felt more protected than he had in his entire life. What happens now? He asked quietly. After tonight, when the sun rises and we must return to our regular lives, how do we reconcile what happened here with the roles we play in daylight? We stop hiding, Lord Ryoma said firmly. I am done pretending I do not want you, done maintaining distance for propriety's sake. You are mine now, Takeshi, ours, and everyone will know it. But I am a servant, Takeshi protested weakly. The household will talk, the other lords will judge. It could cause problems for you. Let them talk, Kenji said. Let them judge. They do not matter. You matter. This matters. We have discussed this among ourselves, Akira added, before tonight, before we knew if you would accept us. We agreed that if you chose to be ours, we would make it known, not flaunt it unnecessarily, but not hide either. Your station will change, Lord Ryoma explained. You will no longer be simply a servant. You will be under my personal protection, elevated in status, untouchable by others. Anyone who wishes to insult or harm you will answer to me, and I am not known for my mercy toward those who threaten what is mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened Takeshi. Instead, it made him feel safe, valued, claimed in the best possible way. "I do not know how to be anything other than a servant," Takeshi admitted. "I do not know what role I would fill if not that." "You will be ours," Daichi said simply. "That is role enough. Companion, lover, the person who shares our private moments and our hearts. Beyond that, you can decide what you wish to do. Continue serving if it brings you satisfaction, or pursue other interests. Learn to read and write if you wish, study arts or philosophy, train with weapons if that calls to you. Your life is no longer just about survival and duty, it can be about discovery and joy." The offer was overwhelming in its generosity, in the freedom it represented. Takeshi had never considered that his life could be anything other than service and obedience. The possibility of choice, of pursuing interests beyond what was required of him, felt almost too large to comprehend. "I would like to learn to read," he said quietly. "I have always wondered about the scrolls Lord Ryoma studies, wanted to understand the words that hold his attention for hours." "Then I will teach you," Lord Ryoma promised. "Every evening we will study together until you can read anything you desire." "And I will teach you the sword," Kenji offered. "Not to make you a warrior, but to give you confidence in your body, understanding of how to move with intention and power." "I will share my books of poetry," Akira said. "Show you how words can create beauty, how language itself can be art. I will teach you strategy games," Daichi added. "Exercise your mind, show you how to think several moves ahead. And I will teach you joy," Hiroshi finished, "how to laugh without restraint, how to play, how to be young in ways you never had the chance to be." Takeshi felt tears threatening again at their offers, at the care behind each promise. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" "Because you deserve it," Lord Ryoma said firmly. "Because we see your worth even if you do not yet see it yourself. Because making you happy makes us happy. Because somewhere in the past months, each of us fell for you in different ways. And now we cannot imagine our lives without you in them." "I fell for you too," Takeshi confessed. "I thought it was hopeless, that nothing could come of these feelings. I never imagined you might want me back." "We more than want you," Kenji said. "We need you. You brought something to our lives we did not know was missing. Softness amid the violence, gentleness in a world of sharp edges, light in places that had grown dark." They lay together in comfortable silence for a while, hands stroking idle patterns on skin, bodies relaxed in the aftermath of pleasure and emotional confession. Takeshi felt his exhaustion pulling at him, inviting sleep, but he fought it, not wanting to miss a moment of this unprecedented closeness. "Sleep," Lord Ryoma commanded gently, seeming to sense his struggle. "We will all be here when you wake. This is not a dream that disappears with morning light." "Promise?" Takeshi asked, the word emerging smaller than he intended. "Promise," all five responded together, and the certainty in their voices finally let Takeshi surrender to sleep, safe in the knowledge that he would not wake alone. He drifted off to the sound of their breathing, the warmth of their bodies, the gentle touches that continued even as consciousness faded. For the first time in years, Takeshi slept without nightmares, without the gnawing loneliness that usually kept him restless through the dark hours. When he woke, sunlight filtered through the paper screens, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. True to their promise, the five warriors still surrounded him, though positions had shifted in sleep. Lord Ryoma held him against his chest, one possessive arm wrapped around his waist. Kenji's hand rested on his thigh. Daichi and Akira were pressed close on either side, and Hiroshi had somehow ended up with his head pillowed on Takeshi's stomach. Takeshi lay very still, not wanting to disturb this perfect moment. but his movement must have been enough because Lord Ryoma's eyes opened, immediately focusing on him with that intense attention. Quote 179. Lord Ryoma murmured, his voice rough with sleep, in a way that sent pleasant shivers through Takeshi. Quote 180. Takeshi replied automatically, then caught himself. Quote 181. Lord Ryoma smiled. Quote 182. Quote 183. Takeshi tested the name, feeling strange speaking it without the honorific. Quote 184. Quote 185, Ryoma said, leaning in to kiss him slowly, thoroughly, morning breath and all. Quote 186. The kiss woke the others, who greeted Takeshi with varying degrees of coherence and affection. Hiroshi was grumpy until Takeshi ran fingers through his hair. Then he practically purred. Kenji was immediately alert, warrior instincts never fully asleep. Daichi and Akira seemed content to watch Takeshi with soft expressions that made his heart stutter. Ryoma said practically, Wanui, quote, Woi 8. Dalmos, quote, 1E9. Takeshi asked, then immediately felt the answer as he shifted position. His body ached in unfamiliar places, reminding him of everything they had done, everything he had experienced. The discomfort was not unpleasant exactly, more like proof that last night had been real. They helped him to the private bathing area attached to Ryoma's chambers, filling the tub with hot water and easing him into it with careful hands. The heat soothed his aching muscles, and Takeshi sighed with relief. Ryoma climbed in behind him, pulling Takeshi back against his chest. The others arranged themselves around the tub's edge, close enough to touch but giving them space. Ryoma said, his fingers tracing idle patterns on Takeshi's shoulder, You cannot return to the servants' quarters. It would be inappropriate now, and I will not have you sleeping apart from us. Where will I sleep then? Takeshi asked. Here, Ryoma said simply. My chambers are large enough. We will arrange additional sleeping mats if needed, though I suspect we will all fit together comfortably enough on mine. The household will know immediately what that means, Takeshi pointed out. Good, Kenji said. Let them know. Let them understand you are under our protection. That harm to you is harm to us. Some will be cruel about it, Akira warned. There are those who will not understand, who will judge you harshly for this relationship. You should be prepared for whispers, for looks, possibly for outright insults from those who do not value their lives enough to fear Lord Ryoma's wrath. I can handle whispers, Takeshi said, with more confidence than he felt. I have survived worse than gossip. But you should not have to survive it alone, Daichi said. We will make it clear that insult to you is insult to us. Most will be wise enough to keep their thoughts private. And those who are not wise will learn painful lessons, Hiroshi added darkly. Ryoma's arm tightened around Takeshi's waist. You are precious to us, he said quietly. We will not tolerate anyone making you feel less than you are. They bathed him with the same care they had shown the night before, gentle hands soaping his skin, washing his hair, touching him with reverence that made Takeshi feel treasured beyond measure. When they finally emerged from the bath, morning had fully arrived and the castle was waking around them. Reality pressed in with the daylight. Takeshi would need clothes, would need to face the household, would need to navigate this dramatic change in his circumstances with grace he was not certain he possessed. I do not know what to wear, he admitted, looking at the servant's clothing he had worn to the bathhouse the night before. It felt wrong now, like wearing a disguise of who he used to be. Quote 12. Ryoma said. Quote 13. Being dressed in Ryoma's clothing felt significant, like wearing a public declaration of belonging. The silk was finer than anything Takeshi had ever worn, the fabric whispering against his skin with costly softness. Ryoma tied the obi himself, his hands lingering perhaps longer than strictly necessary. Perfect, he said when finished. You look like you belong here, in my chambers, wearing my clothes, marked as mine. There was that possessiveness again, and Takeshi found he craved it, wanted to belong to someone after years of belonging to no one. They emerged from Ryoma's chambers together, all 6 of them, and Takeshi was acutely aware of what a statement they were making. Servants stopped in their tasks to stare. Other samurai paused in corridors, eyes widening with recognition and understanding. Takeshi kept his head high, refusing to show the nervousness churning in his stomach. Ryoma's hand rested on the small of his back, possessive and protective, making their relationship unmistakable. They made their way to the morning meal, where the other household members had already gathered. Conversation died as they entered, all eyes turning to assess this unprecedented situation. Ryoma guided Takeshi to sit beside him at the high table, a position of honor usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or family. The statement was clear, unmistakable. Takeshi was no longer a servant to be ignored or overlooked. He was under Lord Ryoma's personal protection, elevated far above his previous station. Ryoma announced to the assembled household, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. Quote 17. The silence was absolute. No one dared question Lord Ryoma when he used that tone, when his eyes promised violence to anyone foolish enough to challenge him. Quote 18. Ryoma said with satisfaction. Quote 19. The meal proceeded with uncomfortable quiet, tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Takeshi picked at his food, too nervous to eat properly, despite his hunger. Under the table, Ryoma's hand found his, squeezed gently in reassurance. After the meal, as the household dispersed, a few brave souls approached. One of the senior household managers, a woman named Hana, who had always been kind to Takeshi, gave him a small smile. I am glad for you, she said quietly. You deserve happiness, and Lord Ryoma is fortunate to have someone who will care for him beyond his title and power. Her acceptance meant more than Takeshi could express. He bowed in gratitude, unable to find words adequate to thank her. Others were less kind. Takeshi caught whispers, saw judgmental looks, heard carefully quiet insults that were meant to reach his ears. But true to their word, the 5 warriors surrounding him made it clear such behavior would not be tolerated. A single cold look from Kenji was enough to silence most dissenters. Hiroshi's hand on his sword hilt communicated wordless threat to those foolish enough to persist. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment. Takeshi moved his few possessions to Ryoma's chambers, claimed space in a life that had previously had no room for him. He began lessons in reading, sitting with Ryoma each evening as promised, learning to recognize characters and string them into meaning. His progress was slow but steady, and Ryoma's patience never wavered. Kenji began teaching him basic sword work, not to make him a warrior, but to give him confidence and grace in his movements. Takeshi found he enjoyed the discipline of it, the way his body learned to move with intention, rather than just function. Akira shared his poetry scrolls, explaining nuance and beauty in language Takeshi was only beginning to grasp. Daiichi taught him strategy games, exercising his mind in new ways. And Hiroshi kept his promise to teach joy, dragging Takeshi to festivals and gardens, showing him how to experience beauty without purpose or productivity. At night, they took turns showing him pleasure, teaching his body every way it could feel good. Sometimes it was Ryoma alone, slow and thorough, making Takeshi fall apart with careful precision. Sometimes it was one of the others, each with their own style, their own way of creating sensation, and sometimes it was more than one, hands and mouths everywhere, overwhelming him with pleasure until he could not tell where one man ended and another began. Takeshi learned he had a taste for praise, that Daiichi's encouraging words could make him desperate. He learned that Kenji's strength could be gentle, that being held down and taken could feel like safety rather than helplessness. He learned that Hiroshi's urgency matched something wild in himself, that sometimes he wanted it hard and fast rather than slow and careful. He learned that Akira's perception meant he could read every micro-expression, adjust every touch to maximize pleasure. But always, it was Ryoma who grounded him, who held him after and whispered assurances that this was real, that Takeshi belonged here, that nothing would take this away. 2 months after that first night in the bathhouse, Takeshi stood in the practice yard watching Ryoma train. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold, made Ryoma's skin gleam with sweat as he moved through forms with devastating grace. Takeshi no longer felt like a servant watching his lord. He felt like a man watching his lover, allowed to appreciate openly, permitted to want without shame. When Ryoma finished and turned to find Takeshi watching, his smile was warm and knowing. "Enjoying the view?" Ryoma asked, approaching with his sword still in hand. "Always," Takeshi admitted. "I do not think I will ever grow tired of watching you move." "Good," Ryoma said, pulling Takeshi close despite being sweat-damp and dusty. "Because I have no intention of stopping." He kissed Takeshi right there in the practice yard, in full view of anyone who might be watching, public and possessive and perfect. Takeshi kissed back without hesitation, no longer afraid of judgment or consequence. When they pulled apart, Ryoma rested his forehead against Takeshi's. He asked quietly. Takeshi thought about his life before, the loneliness and isolation, the feeling of being invisible even when surrounded by people. He thought about who he was now, claimed and cherished, learning and growing, surrounded by men who valued him beyond his utility. He said, honestly. Quote 29. Quote 30. Ryoma said. Quote 31. Around them, the other four had gathered, drawn by the open affection between Ryoma and Takeshi. They formed their familiar circle, protective and possessive, and Takeshi felt completely safe within it. Quote 32. Hiroshi asked. Quote 33. Quote 34. Ryoma said simply. Quote 35. Quote 36. Takeshi said. Quote 37. Quote 38. Kenji promised. Quote 39. And they did. As seasons turned and years passed, their bond deepened rather than fading. Takeshi became fluent in reading, developed grace with a practiced sword, found joy in poetry and strategy, and simply being alive. The household grew accustomed to the arrangement, accepted it as simply part of Lord Ryoma's domain. Other lords occasionally questioned the propriety of it, but Ryoma's reputation for deadly skill and absolute authority meant few dared voice objections openly. Those who did learned that Ryoma's patience for insults to Takeshi was non-existent, that challenging this relationship meant facing consequences few survived intact. Takeshi discovered he had a talent for household management, for seeing patterns in resources and logistics that others missed. Ryoma gave him authority over the domestic aspects of the estate, and Takeshi proved himself more than capable, earning respect through competence rather than just association with Lord Ryoma. But more than accomplishments or respect, Takeshi found belonging. He found home in Ryoma's chambers, in the circle of strong arms that held him each night, in quiet morning conversations and passionate evening encounters. He found family in these 5 men who had seen him when he thought himself invisible, who had wanted him when he thought himself unworthy of want. 5 years after that first night, Takeshi stood on the balcony of Ryoma's chambers, watching cherry blossoms fall like snow across the garden below. Ryoma came to stand behind him, arms wrapping around his waist, chin resting on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Ryoma asked quietly. "About how different my life is from what I imagined," Takeshi said. "I thought I would serve invisibly, grow old alone, die unmourned and unremarked. Instead, I have love and purpose and a place that is truly mine. I have you, all of you." "We are the fortunate ones," Ryoma corrected. "You could have chosen safety, could have rejected what we offered out of fear or propriety. Instead, you were brave enough to want, to reach for something that seemed impossible. You made us better by letting us love you." Takeshi turned in Ryoma's arms to face him. Quote 45. He said, the words coming easily now after years of practice. Quote 46. Quote 47. Ryoma said, kissing him softly. Quote 48. The other four emerged onto the balcony, drawn as always to where Ryoma and Takeshi were. They surrounded them in that familiar protective circle, and Takeshi felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This was his family, his home, his life. Built from a moment of vulnerability in a bathhouse, from the courage to admit wanting, from 5 warriors who saw value in one overlooked servant and decided to claim him as theirs. Quote 49. Takeshi said to all of them. Quote 50. Quote 51. Daichi replied. Quote 52. They stood together as cherry blossoms continued their gentle fall, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, as the world continued around them, unchanged by their love but made more beautiful for it. Takeshi had learned many things in his years with these men. He had learned to read and write, to move with grace, to appreciate beauty and strategy. But the most important lesson was this, that being seen, being wanted, being loved could transform a life completely. That surrender to the right people was not weakness, but the bravest thing you could do. That family was not always born, but sometimes chosen, built from want and trust and the daily decision to stay, to fight for what mattered, to claim your place in someone else's heart. He had started as a servant who thought himself invisible, who built walls so high no one could see his loneliness. He had become someone who knew his worth, who stood beside legends as an equal, who woke each morning surrounded by love and went to sleep, each night safe in the knowledge that he belonged. The bathhouse where it all began still stood in the castle grounds. Sometimes, when nostalgia called, the 6 of them would return there, would recreate that first meeting with full knowledge of where it would lead. They would surround Takeshi in the steam, and he would remember being afraid and alone and desperate for connection. Then they would take him back to their chambers and remind him that he was none of those things anymore, that he never would be again. This was the life Takeshi had found in the arms of 5 warriors who decided one servant was worth noticing, worth wanting, worth keeping. And every day, he was grateful for the courage it took to say yes when they offered him everything.